Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. I'm your DJ and host, Sam Wilson Jr., and I'm here to bring you the history genre of black music: gospel, jazz, blues, old school classic soul, old school hip hop, today's hip hop and R&B, Caribbean, Latin, Afrobeat, Afro-Latina, blue-eyed soul, disco, go-go, line dances, and the Lost 45s. So come with me as I take you on to a trip to the history destination genre of black music, right now on the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. Welcome to the Black Soul Music Experience. I'm Sam Wilson Jr., and I have a special guest on my podcast, and we're doing a blue-eyed soul white chocolate episode. Now, this lady that I'm about to introduce to you is from Canada. She is a singer and a songwriter. Her music is best described as contemporary soft rock with some Celtic influences that she inherited while growing up in Nova Scotia. Her solo LP, Rise, is celebrating its 20th anniversary, and I got a chance to listen to a couple of her songs on YouTube, including Singing in the Rain and Better Now, and let me tell you, those songs are bluesy, soulfully good, mellow ballads. Now, that's the kind of songs that I listen to. So, anyway, please help me welcome to my Black Soul Music Experience podcast, representing Canada. Her name is Linda Raine. Hi, Linda. How are you?
I'm just fantastic, Sam. How are you?
I'm doing fine, and you? Welcome to my podcast. Glad to have you here, or should I say in Canadian, I should say bonjour.
Bonjour. Thank you
And
for
in,
having me.
You're welcome. And in case you may not know, the Black Soul Music Experience podcast is aired in Canada. I picked up some listeners in Canada and overseas. So everyone has been tuning in. And
Wonderful.
this is season number 4. So we're doing something different for season 4, reaching out to some new singers, new guests here in the United States and Canada and all parts of the world. So in any language, they all listen to some of my music podcasts with all soul music, blue-eyed soul, and yes, anything that has to do with soul, because I was raised on Frankie Crocker. That's one of my radio DJs. He played everything. He didn't care if it was white, black, Latino, Asian, Caribbean, Native American, Indian, or LGBTQ. He knew that music was music that brings people together.
It
Now,
is
the only,
universal.
yes, and the only
Yeah.
musicians I know from Canada, Robin Thicke. Robin Thicke, we know, and his
Yes.
father is the late Alan Thicke. And yes, we have some others, including Deborah Cox and Drake. And this other group came out in the 70s, the early 70s, and the group was Skylark. And it was,
Skylark. Okay.
yes, they're known for its top 10 hit Wildflower. So it's, yeah, kind of like some soul in it. And it was played on some of the soul radio stations here in the United States. And I did some information on that because I did some love songs episode on there as well. So,
Okay.
so this is my first time interviewing you from Canada, and we say welcome to here in the United States. So, without further ado, let us begin. Now, where were you born in Toronto, Canada? Or what
I,
part of Canada?
I was born in Etobicoke, which is a suburb of Toronto. Etobicoke, Ontario.
And then you later moved to Leamington, which is in Ontario as well, correct?
Yes, actually, after I was born, I lived in Mississauga, which is also a suburb of Toronto. I lived in Mississauga until I was about 13 years old, and then my father's got transferred with his job to Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. So we moved to the east coast of Canada, and I lived there for 11 years. And then that's really where my musical journey began, was in Nova Scotia. And then I moved back to Ontario and moved to Leamington, Ontario, which is the most southern tip of Canada. We're south of a lot of the U.S. states. I'm down near Point Pelee, which is the most southern tip of Canada. And I moved here in 2012.
Ah. Now, were your parents in the music business, or they had just regular 9 to 5 day jobs?
They had regular 9 to 5 day jobs, but my mother was a singer, not a songwriter, but she was a singer and a musician. She played guitar and piano. And I have an uncle that was also a singer and musician, played guitar, and I had an aunt who played guitar. So I grew up in a family of musicians, and that's where my musical influences first started, was with my own family.
Now, what high school did you go to in Toronto? I know that schools up there in Toronto is different from here in the United States. So, what high school did you went to in Toronto?
I actually went to, I moved to Nova Scotia before I went to high school. So I went to Prince Andrew High School in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. That's where I went to high school. And then I went to a business college in Halifax. And then I moved back to Ontario, and I took a few courses at Sheridan College in marketing, and I took a corporate law clerk certification course.
I was going to ask you that next question. What college did you went to, and what was the college that you went to again?
I went to Sheridan College in Ontario. I just took a few courses there.
Oh, okay. And what was your major in college?
Corporate law clerk.
Oh, corporate law clerk. Oh, okay. Now, corporate law clerk. What is that kind of like similar to working in the mailroom or helping out someone in the law department, like sending out letters or
It's
anything like that?
it's helping out. My job was actually working for an in-house legal counsel for a financial services company.
Mm-hmm.
So I assisted him with legal documentation, legal research, that sort of thing. Preparing for board meetings, preparing and drafting resolutions for the board of directors meetings and the shareholders meetings. So that's basically what I did.
Now, how's the educational system in Canada different from the U.S.?
In Canada, the educational system is governed provincially. We have provinces in Canada, not states. And the education system in Canada is governed provincially. And my understanding in the U.S. is governed federally. And something I learned in my own, while growing up in junior high school, we were taught American geography in high school, whereas I don't think they taught any Canadian geography in the American schools. Am I correct?
Right.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Hmm.
But we were definitely taught American geography and some American history as well.
Now, you mentioned you had some family relatives in the music industry. Do you have any additional family relatives that were in the music industry?
No, just my uncle and my aunts and my mother.
Now, while living in Toronto, Ontario, did your radio station play some of your favorite American artists?
Absolutely, probably more so than Canadian content. It wasn't until probably the last 15 years that they developed legislation in Canada where the radio stations have to play more Canadian content. Prior to that, it was predominantly American content. So most definitely, yes.
Now, growing up, who were your favorite American singers or musicians?
Well, let's see. There was Patsy Cline, um, Canadian country, or sorry, American country artist. A lot of the American country artists like Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson, and I loved funk and R&B, Earth, Wind and Fire, Michael Jackson, um, Fleetwood Mac, the Eagles. Those were my major influences.
Hmm. I was about to say that next question. Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles. And, I love some of the songs from the Eagles back in the 70s, Itchy Woman and I Can't Tell You Why. There's a new
Yes,
kid in town. And of course, Fleetwood Mac, Dreams, and that other song, Don't Stop. They used
yeah.
that song for the Clinton campaign in 92. So I see
Hmm.
you have some musical influences right there. Now, let's talk about you as being a lead singer when you were younger. You were the lead singer of the group called Diamond and the Rough. How did they get your nickname you Diamond?
Well, we formed a group. We first started as just an acoustic group, all acoustic guitars, and then we decided that we wanted to expand our horizons and pulled out the electric guitars and the drums and the bass. So we had formed this group, me being the only woman in the group, and there was five guys, and we had, like I said, we had a lead guitarist, we had a rhythm guitarist, two rhythm guitarists, we had a drummer and a bass player, and then we had another guy who did some percussion. And we had decided that we wanted to come up with a name for the group because we decided that we were going to go out and play some live gigs. So they started passing around names for we all came up with names for the band, and one of the guys in the band came up with Diamond and the Rough being Ruff. So they decided that I was the Diamond because I'm the lead singer. I was the lead singer of the band, and they were the Rough, the Ruff.
Now, how long were you in that group?
About I'd say 12 years.
Now, one time I see that you were one time a host of a college radio show at one time. Is that correct?
No, I was not the host. I was a guest on that show at Centennial College in Toronto. They reached out to me. They saw my music online, and the host of the radio college show there reached out to me and asked if I would consider coming in and being a guest. So I did. So that's probably what you're thinking of that you may have seen on my site. I was a guest on that show. Yes.
Now, you performed with Jimmy Flynn as well as working with producer Marius DeVries. What was your experience on working with those two men?
It was wonderful. Jimmy Flynn is both a musician and a comedian on the east coast of Canada. Not so much now. I think he's pretty much retired by now. But um, back back in the day when I had the opportunity to work with him, he was very well known and popular in the east coast of Canada.
Hmm.
Very funny man. And my brother played hockey, and my parents were very involved in the local hockey association in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. And they have a international tournament every year. And the organizer of the tournament had heard that I was a singer-songwriter and asked me if I would write a song for the hockey tournament. So with myself and a friend of mine, Paul Verge, we got together and wrote a song called Up for the Tourney, and they had me record it with Jimmy Flynn and his partner. At that time they were called Finnegan. And we recorded the song Up for the Tourney, and then we performed it at the opening ceremonies for the hockey tournament. And then in addition to that, I had to sing the national anthems, the American and the Canadian national anthems at that hockey tournament. And they played that song before every single game at the tournament. So it was a wonderful experience for me because that was the first time I ever got to work in a recording studio.
Hmm.
And it was a wonderful experience. Now, with respect to Marius DeVry, I worked at Citibank in Toronto, And Citibank, one of the foundations of their company was talent. So they were celebrating their anniversary, and they had a talent contest, if you will, throughout the company worldwide. So we all had to sing this song called Proud and submit a video of the song for consideration to be flown to New York to record the song with all of the other employees in the company who had been selected. So I got selected for Canada, and they flew me to Manhattan, and I got to work with Marius DeVry, who produced the corporate video, and I got to sing with all the talented people that worked for Citi at the time.
Now, let's talk about your solo LP, Rise, which is celebrating its 20th anniversary, and it was produced by Roberto Phillip and Cynthia Knight. Please share with our audience about your album, which is a mixture of soft rock, blues, blue-eyed soul, a mixture of everything. Please share that with me and our audience about that
Absolutely.
20th anniversary of that album.
Well, how that album came about was many years ago. I went through some hard times in my life, and a lot of the experiences that I had made for some really great songwriting opportunities. So I wrote the majority of the songs in that album is an experience, is my life experiences from probably 2005 onwards. And so I met Roberto Phillip and Cynthia Knight through a friend of mine, and asked them if they would produce my album, and that took probably it took us probably about 3 years to produce that album. And I poured my heart and soul into all of the songs that are on that album.
Now, as I mentioned, I got a chance to listen a couple of your songs on YouTube, including "Singing in the Rain." Not the "Singing in the Rain" that we all grew up on from the late Gene Kelly. Not
That's
that
right.
"Singing in the Rain." We're talking about the different version of "Singing in the Rain." We just want to let our audience know, because they probably thought you were doing a remake of the song, but we want
Right.
to let our audience know it's the different version of "Singing in the Rain." And I also listened to your other song, "Before Now," and I got a chance to listen to a couple of those songs and some other songs. I forgot the name of them, and I did get a chance to check out your new country song, which we'll talk about that in a
Oh, you
minute.
did.
I just
Okay.
saw that on YouTube, and yeah, so we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. So speaking of that, talk about your next album project, which it will be your first country album. So please share with that with us, please.
So, You Ain't Him is the first song that would be on. I've decided I'm going to release the songs as singles as opposed to an album, but I plan on writing enough. I've already written quite a few songs, and I plan on releasing those singles one after the other as soon as they're produced. So the faster my producer can produce those songs, the faster they'll be released. And I've got probably about 10 songs under my belt right now that I can take to him for production.
Okay. So I see that you have changed genres. You went from being soft rock, contemporary soft rock with some Celtic influences, and you changed over to country music. And I've seen that I was at the Smithsonian's African American History Museum, where they had African Americans bringing country music and combining it with Celtic dancing. So now I get your picture. Me growing up, I've never listened to country music. I never had listened to country music. Just growing up, the only brother I knew was Charlie Pride, the only brother in country music.
Yes.
And you mentioned Patsy Cline, but some of the other country musicians that I do like, for example, Johnny Cash. We all
Absolutely.
know the Man in
Yep.
Black. He had his
Yes.
own. variety show back then, and also Dolly Parton. She had
Yes.
her variety show back in the late 80s, and Barbara Mandrell. Barbara Mandrell, she did some remake of some soul classic hits from the 70s. And of course, the late Kenny Rogers. He went from pop to country in the mid 70s, and he's best known for its hits, including Lucille, The Gambler, which was a top 10 hit, and Lady, which was written by Lionel Richie, was number one. So Kenny Rogers and Barbara Mandrell, and those are the singers that I like, and Charlie Pride too. And we don't want to leave out some of the other artists, including Shania Twain, who's from
Yeah,
Canada too.
that's right.
So, yes. And some of her songs were played at the Caribbean nightclubs, after work parties. And yes, most of her music videos have premiered on VH1, crossed over, top 10 hits, and played some so many Light FM stations across the country. So you never know. So I got a chance to listen to some of my favorite country singers that include Shania Twain and Barbara Mandrell and Kenny Rogers and this new group, Little Big Town. Now, I saw
Yes,
them
they're
perform
fantastic.
at the Academy of Country Music Awards. They had that love ballad. I was like, now that was some country soulful feeling
There
right
you
there.
go. Yeah.
Now, who were some of your favorite musicians that you had worked with besides those two people that you just mentioned?
Well, the only I would say the guys in my band, of course, and that would be Mark Bradley and Donnie Williams and Andrew Minialoff and Kirk Holloway, and of course my producer Roberto Phillip, who is a very talented musician. You can tell that based on what you hear in my album. And you can see he's really got some chops when it comes to guitars, whether it's classical guitar or rock or country. He also produced my most recent country single. So you could see that he's a really talented guitar player.
Now, here's the next question that I always ask my guest. Living or dead, who were some of your favorite musicians that you wish you wanted to perform with?
I would say Patsy Cline and Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles.
Yeah, so those are my two favorites, Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles. Some of my two favorites that I be listening to because when I was growing up, I was listening to the other stations. Me and my late mother, we would listen to some of the top 40 radio stations, and like on a Sunday afternoon. And then when I had my own transistor radio, during my 10th birthday of October 1976. It was a little wrist radio, but it was kind of new. We had in New York, we had WNBC 66 AM, WABC Music Radio 77, and WWRL 1600. They would play some of the top 40 hits. They would be playing the Eagles and Fleetwood Mac, and they'd be playing Stevie Wonder and the Jackson Five, with Michael Jackson when he was younger before he went on
Right.
to solo stardom, and the Bee Gees. Those are
Absolutely.
some of the singers that got a lot of soul in it, and also disco came on the scene, Donna Summer, and everybody that I grew up listening to. So still up to this date, I still listen to some of the songs on YouTube as well as some of the other stations, PBS, NPR radio stations across the country that I be listening to. So I had like some different flavors, and different styles that I always get a chance to listen to. And yes, Skylark with their top 10 hit Wildflower. And that song have been covered by so many artists, including The New Birth. They did their version of Wildflower in 1973. And then the OJs they did their live version of Wildflower from their LP, The OJ's Live in London in 1974. And yes, that song was sampled by Jamie Foxx. They're just using the intro of the song for his song called Unpredictable. So they would
Okay.
sample the intro, but not from Skylark, but from The New Birth when they had to do that sample from that song. So I was listening to everything in different taste and different styles. So that's me growing up during the 70s and 80s. Now, here on my Black Soul Music Experience podcast, I always ask my guests who is their favorite top 10 R&B black artist of all time. So here's how it works. We do it like a top 10 countdown like you hear on the radio stations every day. So we start at number 10. We start with the artist who's the best singer around but didn't get any recognition. And we work our way up to number one, who was the best artist ever, who had the best number one hits, top 10 hits, that the LP sold as gold, platinum, double platinum, triple platinum, that the artist received an American Music Award or a Grammy or a Soul Train Award or a BET Award or an MTV, VMA, or yes, Academy of Country Music Award, that their artists were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, or did they perform that song on Saturday Night Live or American Bandstand or Soul Train or the Midnight Special, and yes, Hee Haw, just to name a few. So on this episode with you coming from Canada, we're going to be doing the top 10 R&B black and blue-eyed soul artists, which came out of Canada. So I don't know if you know anybody. If you have your
Okay, well, there's The Weekend.
okay, The Weeknd, number 10, came on the scene with his debut song from the movie 50 Shades of Grey. And then
Correct,
he
yes.
had some other songs that I like. Some of the movies were from Black Panther. And yeah, The Weeknd, just to name a few. I was just keep thinking about why he left out that N at the end.
I know. I always wondered that myself. And then there's Salome Bay, who was Canada's first lady of the blues.
Ah, Salome Bay, Canada's first jazz singer, correct?
Yes.
Hmm. I'll have to look that up on YouTube and on my iTunes as well.
And then
And
there's Harrison Kennedy. He moved from Hamilton, Ontario to Detroit to join the chairman of the board.
oh yeah, I didn't know. Oh, so we have a member who just joined that group. Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then there's Crack of Dawn, loosely modeled after Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Hmm.
And they made history by becoming the first black Canadian group to sign a contract with a major record label.
Wow. Hmm. That I didn't know.
I did my research.
Hmm.
And
Good
then
for
there's
you.
then there's Liberty Silver. Her big hit was Lost Somewhere Inside Your Love. And then there's Bass is Bass. Their hit in Canada was Funkmobile. Excuse me. Great song. And then there was Deborah Cox.
Ah, yes, the one and only Deborah Cox. She
Yes.
had a couple of hits back in the late 90s, including her top 10 hit, Nobody's Supposed to Be Here, written by Montel Jordan. And yes, she had a couple of hits back then. You know, hopefully we'll hear from her real soon.
Yes. And then Tamia.
Yes, the one and only Tamia. She made her debut back in 1996 on Quincy Jones's LP, Q's Joint, a top 10 debut hit called You Put a Move on My Heart. And then she went on to do some other hits, I'm So Into You, and many other hits. Yes.
And then there's Drake.
Yes, everybody loves some Drake. Yes. Now, I didn't know back then he was an actor back then. I think he was in the show called Degrassi High.
He
And I
was.
was watching it one of the Connecticut stations, or UPN 9 in Connecticut. It's not there anymore. I usually have the converter box, so many stations will air that show. Not all the stations here in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area, but he's best remembered for Degrassi High. Then went on to superstardom. He had some songs, top 10 hits. Let me tell you, a lot of hip hop hits too. And he can sing, he can rap, he can act. And I loved him when he was the guest host on NBC's Saturday Night Live. I believe it was back in 2018 when he was the guest host. And he played a skit called Black Jeopardy. That was the black
Yes.
version of the game show Jeopardy.
Yes, I saw it. It was funny.
Yeah, and his other skit, American Ninja Warrior, he was, the moderator and everything. So then I saw one of my late CBS coworkers. I was like, wait a minute, ain't that Lori Lawrence? One of my coworkers? And I didn't know that she was an actress on the side. So she's been doing everything. So hats off to Drake. Drake is doing it all. He has some top 10 hits. All of his singles doing well. All of them are platinum, multi platinum. He performed everywhere during concerts, especially doing duets and collaborations with so many today's R&B and hip hop artists. And yes, I mentioned acting from Degrassi High all the way to being a guest host and musical guest on Saturday Night Live. And yes, he's doing pretty good. So hats off to Drake and everybody else that we've just mentioned. Well, Linda, it is a pleasure to be with you on my Black Soul Music Experience podcast. Thank you for taking the time out to be with me on my show and from Canada. Thank you so much. And before I go, I want to mention that I went to Montreal for the first time back in 2004 with my church members. We went to the Montreal Jazz Festival. It was the 4th of July holiday weekend, 2004. I got a chance to see all around what was playing in some of the jazz concerts. I wanted to see it for myself because I was watching something on PBS back in 2004. It was Pledge Month, and the late Marvin Gaye had performed at the Montreal Jazz Festival, even though I didn't get a chance to get tickets to go inside the big Coliseum. But I was just curious about what was on the outside when I go to different jazz festivals from here and there. So on that Friday evening, I went to some nightclubs in Montreal, and then Saturday, I got a chance to see some other activities, and I got a chance to see Elaine Elias at this some concert place in Montreal. It was a Saturday evening, and then after that, I got a chance to go sneak out to some dance clubs on late Saturday night. I didn't get back to the hotel until 1 in the morning.
So you got
And
some real Montreal experience there.
yes, and then Sunday I got a chance to see, backstage where the Funk Brothers were supposed to perform in the evening, and I got a chance to see the late Jerry Allen at that same club where Elaine Elias was playing, and everything was all good. So I brought some of that jazz vibe back home to the NYC. So it was my first experience. The only difference was we had to exchange money. That was something new to me. So that was
Yeah.
something that I had to experience with. But again,
Our money's
Linda,
pretty colorful.
yes, yes, indeed. Again, thank you so much for being here on my podcast. Now, before we go, where can we find you for any upcoming events, or where can we follow you on social media?
I'm on Facebook under Linda Raine. I'm on Reverb Nation under Linda Raine. I'm on Twitter under Blue Lou, and I'm on Instagram under Linda Raine. And my music is on Spotify and all digital stores.
Hmm. Now, Blue Lou, is that like Lou or just like
Yes,
B?
LOU,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Yeah, because most of the time I see some other names like Blue or like BLU. Sometimes they'll still with a BLU and then LOU. Sometimes they'll say it the other way around, but you know
No, it's
how it is.
BLUELOU. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty. Download the LP Rise from my guest, Linda Raine. That is the 20th anniversary LP that we have talked about today on this edition of the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. Visit iTunes.com, Spotify.com, or purchase a CD at Amazon.com. And make sure you follow Linda Raine. Look for her on Facebook. Also, look for her music on Spotify. Also, look for her on X, aka Twitter. And also, check out her songs on YouTube, audio version, and check out the new country song called You Ain't Him. It's available now, streaming right now on YouTube. And ladies and gentlemen, if you want to see this interview, please subscribe by going to riverside.fm/studio/Samuel Wilson Jr.'s with an S at the end dash studio. And make sure you please pass it on. Thank you for joining me as I close out this edition of the Black Soul Music Experience. Well, that's about it for this edition of the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. I'm Sam Wilson Jr. Thank you for joining me, and please tune in next week for an all-new episode. The Black Soul Music Experience podcast is sponsored by the support of listeners like you. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe by going to riverside.fm/studio/Samuel Wilson Jr.'s studio. And don't forget to check out my audio podcast episodes by becoming a member and subscribe to patreon.com/the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. You can leave your feedbacks, comments, and replies by visiting my Facebook homepage. Go to facebook.com/the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. You can also tweet me on X, aka Twitter, at Sam Wilson Jr. 66. As always, parting, remember this: reach for the top, and your dreams will come true, and it can happen to you. From all of us, take care. God bless. Thanks for listening. Have a good week, and please be safe.